Welcome to episode 29 of Anchored in Education. I'm Scott England, and Anchored in Education is the podcast dedicated to all things education. Educators across the world routinely engage in conversations surrounding fundamentals, concepts, and new ideas that improve this great profession. Sometimes we agree, other times we disagree. But at the end of the day, we are all anchored in education. A while back, I had my sister Jodi England on Anchored in Education to artfully discuss art in the curriculum. Now, Jodi has always been a strong advocate for art inclusion into all aspects of education, and if you haven't done so already, I recommend to go to my website, escottengland.com, to check out that episode. Today, though, I've invited her back to talk about how art can positively impact the lives of individuals with special needs. Now, several years ago, Jodi was asked to organize, direct, and teach for an organization called Our Voice Through Art. And the mission of that organization is to provide art experiences for teens and adults with special needs in her surrounding area. So she will speak to us about that, along with accommodations in the art classroom, as well as how to utilize aides and other support staff to create successful experiences for students. Jodi, welcome to Anchored in Education.
Thanks, Scott.
Hey, so first of all, I appreciate you coming back. And a lot of my listeners probably think, since you're my sister, that this is just really convenient and it's simple to schedule a time to talk, and especially over the summer with summer break. But it's far from the case. So let's dispel that myth of summer is just a time for relaxing, and tell us a little bit about what you've been up to over the summer.
Yeah, it was a very busy summer for me, not a lot of downtime. In June, right after school started, I taught a camp for a week.
Art camp?
Yeah, it was Our Voice Through Art, which we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
Yeah, a full week of fun art with those students. And then at that same time, actually, and through the month of June, I was taking an art history class. I'm working on my master's in art education through Eastern Illinois University. And so I was taking an art history class, and then overlapping the end of June there, a printmaking class, kind of started an online portion of that. And then into July, I got to spend a week on campus at Eastern doing an intensive studio course in printmaking. So that was awesome, incredible, a lot of work. And then it went right into prepping for the school year. So I really didn't have any kind of a break, as most teachers don't during the summer.
And unless you're in education, you don't really understand that. And
yeah.
So though it was hard to schedule a time to talk, I, being your brother, did receive a lot of those pictures from the printmaking studio class. So a lot of fun you had in that, it looked
great.
like.
Yeah, it was really great.
All right, so in my opening, I briefly mentioned Our Voice Through Art, and you just did a minute ago, and we'll get to that in just a second. But first of all, how about your experience working with students with special needs in art?
Sure, I've had a lot of very positive experiences with mainstreaming and inclusion of special education from the start of my career. I'm in my 20th year this year, Scott.
Wow, 20 years.
Yeah.
That's quite a feat, though.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. And I've had special education students in the art room with me from the get-go, and I've always welcomed any ability, because I really do truly believe that everyone is an artist, and art class is for everyone, and art projects can be adapted to any level and any ability.
All right, so let's get into Our Voice Through Art, because I sure did not do it justice in my opening, and I think my listeners would love to hear more about some of these experiences, but also how this came to be.
Sure. Well, it was the start of my teaching at Argenta, Oriana. I teach at the middle school and high school there, and in about 2014, I had a high school art student who's autistic and nonverbal, and his name is Jarrett Sikoski, and he communicated through his art and through painting specifically, and it was just really incredible to see his expression and his excitement over creating, and his dad came to me and asked if I would help him get a program going for the community so other teens and adults with special needs could have art experiences. Oftentimes, there are special needs students who don't get to experience art in school. And so this gave the ability for them to come to us. We work out of Macon Resources Incorporated, so it's MRI at Indicator, and that's where we have our classroom. And we started this program, Our Voice Through Art, and we do 6-week sessions 4 times a year. So we have a winter, spring, summer, and fall session. So every Tuesday during those session times, we meet in the evening and create art for an hour, hour and a half. And it's just really been a great, incredible experience to bring people together with all different levels of abilities to create and experience art.
And I always get myself in trouble trying to come up with art terms, but I believe the term I'm looking for is medium. What kind of mediums are you using?
Yeah, we use all different kinds of media in Our Voice Through Art. Printmaking, painting, collage. A lot of students like to cut and paste. It's kind of getting to know the students too and what they are comfortable with and familiar with. We have some that love oil pastels, and we have some that don't care for the texture of it. We do work with clay. Some don't prefer the texture of clay. So we have alternative variations of projects too. So we really do try to meet everyone's needs and preferences. But just about every kind of material that you can imagine, we work with in Our Voice Through Art.
All right. So it sounds like a lot of fun. And you do have a Facebook page, Our Voice Through Art. So I will link that. But you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, we have our Facebook page that is Our Voice Through Art. And I love being able to share pictures of our classes. And so I'd love for everybody to go check out that page and follow along. I'd also like to make a shout out to Jarrett Sikoski, because Jarrett is still creating art. He's no longer a student of mine, but he is still painting and creating art down in Florida with where his family lives now. And he has a page on Facebook you can follow also that is called Jarrett's Voice Through Art. So that is where we got our name, is from Jarrett. He really spearheaded the whole thing, and we wouldn't have this program if it weren't for the Sikoskis.
Well, we will make sure to put a link to that our listeners can check it out. Now, in our first episode, An Artful Conversation, we talked about how art in general could have a positive impact on everyone. Can you right now share with us how creating artwork benefits students with special needs?
Sure. Well, certain tools and techniques that are used when creating can help to develop fine motor skills. So that can be really important. Something, that's been helpful is feeding beads onto wire or to pipe cleaner, those kinds of things like that. And we also focus on concentration, being able to focus and concentrate on something, making decisions, expression of ideas, and also expressing emotions and communicating through art.
So I heard the word communication, and we have highlighted many great benefits art has on communication, especially for those younger students. But since we're in that area, let's stay there for a minute and talk about work you've done with nonverbal students. Have you had any? And then also, what strategies, if you did, would you use to include everyone in on the lesson?
Sure. And, as I mentioned, Jarrett Sikoski was a nonverbal student that I had, and I have had others, and even students who are deaf and blind. So with all different levels of abilities and ability to communicate, the incredible thing about art class is that anyone can create and feel successful. So I get messages across regarding safety and techniques through different methods of demonstration, and have found that I don't always need my voice to communicate with students, just as they don't need to be verbal either. So I think it's especially important. I also want to mention this, Scott. I think it's really important for students with disabilities to be in a class with fully abled students. I think that it benefits those students to have acceptance and understanding of disabilities, but also peer communication can be helpful and important. Just as we would say our typical students need that in the classroom, so do students with special needs. And it's really been great for me to have that inclusion and to see those students interacting, helping one another, and learning from each other.
All right, so I've heard you say many times that anyone can create art, but, and you alluded to this just a minute ago, there must be accommodations to consider. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, it's important to understand each student's disability. And so before the students even enter the room, the teacher needs to read through their IEP, meet with the special education teachers, talk to aides if the students have one. If you can, even talk directly to the parents. You can look up information about different disabilities online, but you need to know that specific student and know what works for them, what doesn't work for them. And that's how you can really prepare for them being in your classroom. So teachers need to be prepared for the students' interaction and with the personal space. So in an art room, we're up moving around often. It's important to know, will the student be coming in a wheelchair or have a walker, for example? So knowing their mobility, if they're able to move around to get supplies, if they're able to work at different stations, and so on, is really important. Also, students with special needs might have some sensory issues. So there are different textures, smells, even sounds in the art room that can be alarming and uncomfortable. So there's also much to be prepared for physically and just the day-to-day. Projects need to be adapted with accommodations. It does take some extra time in planning, but it's important to remember that you need to be flexible because there are some situations that can come up that you might not be expecting. I think that most art teachers are really great at being flexible and making quick decisions to help students on the spot. So even though it might seem intimidating to work with students with special needs, it's not really that much extra time and effort.
So one of the first things that you mentioned there was talking with parents, and so have you had success in finding out things that maybe an IEP wouldn't be able to tell you, or that you wouldn't find from other teachers whenever you can talk to the parents?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it can be those things like, for example, alarming sounds and things like that. I've had students, and I couldn't find that in the paperwork per se, but talking to the parents, I was able to find out that a student might have a reaction. Like a strong reaction is like, maybe the head falling down to the table
Hmm.
if a really loud sound is heard in the classroom. And those are things we need to be prepared for because, you don't want students hammering or carving plaster or whatnot, or at least you need to be able to prepare the student with special needs for those kinds of situations if you're aware of that.
Absolutely, I think that's a good one. A few weeks back, Charlie Cass and I were talking about family involvement and family engagement and how really having that connection can only lead to further success in the classroom.
Sure,
So
absolutely.
glad to hear that you mentioned it as well. Now, one of the other things that you mentioned that some students might have is an individual aid to assist. And so I know an art room can become a busy place. You've got various materials, you've got tools, you've got students, and all sometimes working at many different levels. And so you've got a lot of movement in your classroom.
Yeah.
How can an art teacher best utilize a student's aid in promoting, say, an overall high quality experience for students?
Right. Well, first and foremost, Scott, shout out to all of the aides.
Yes.
And what would we do without our teachers' aides? I mean, they're absolutely incredible, and they've really been life-saving for me. I
Uh,
have learned so much
and
from
they
the
don't
aides.
get enough credit.
They certainly do not. I have had so many great experiences with wonderful aides who have been assisting students. They're with the students all day. They know them so well. And so I've been able to learn from them what the students need to have the most positive experience possible. I've been able to also reach out to our local university, Millikan University. They have an art therapy program. So I was able to connect with them, and actually Matt Sikorsky was beneficial in helping to kind of coordinate that and to have art therapy students come in to help assist with students also. So that's really great. They need internship hours, so having hands-on experience in the art room, it's very beneficial for them.
Now, was Matt a former student of yours?
No, Matt was Jarrett's dad. He
Oh,
is
okay.
Jarrett's dad.
Okay. Now, you've mentioned college students. Are those college students you mentioned practicing art therapy techniques with your students in the classroom?
They're not actually.
Okay.
So there's a difference between art therapy and art as therapy. So I don't practice art therapy techniques myself, but I do wholeheartedly believe that art can be therapeutic.
Okay.
So there are many ways of making art that's so good for the heart, the mind, and the soul. And my philosophy is process over product. And so it's about the experience of creating, not the end result. So there's no right or wrong way to create art. And when students know this, they become most comfortable expressing themselves. So that's what I have those interns helping me with.
Okay. So before we go today, Jodi, you mention frequently that art is for everyone and that everyone is an artist. And I know that you have sold Sage, my daughter.
She's very talented.
She is, and she, I believe, just told Jennifer a while back that when she has a house, she's going to make sure that it has an art studio in it.
Right.
So
She's helped me organize mine many times, so she will have it down. Yeah.
yes, and now we've heard both times that you've been a guest on Anchored in Education. You say this as well. So, and of course, I'll go ahead and throw in that being your brother, I've heard that phrase many times. I'm hoping before you go, you would like to speak more about that to help our listeners understand.
Absolutely. I think every single human has an innate ability to create in one way or another. Every single person. No matter a person's ability or disability, they are able to create. And there's just such an incredible feeling and sense of pride that comes from making a mark or building something. And every person deserves a chance to experience that.
Well, I definitely think that, you're 20 years in teaching, but you have been promoting art long before you became a teacher. And, I've said that you have sold Sage on it, but you've also, you've touched the lives of many students through your career and continue to promote not just the education profession, but also the art profession. So,
Yeah, thank you.
Keep up that good work.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Well, I'm really passionate about art and art education specifically, and I'm really happy to be able to share anything I can. I don't feel like I am an expert. I'm still learning about working, especially with students with special needs, but it's definitely a topic that I'm passionate about and excited to talk about anytime, so I thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And we appreciate you sharing with us, and thank you so much, Jodi, for joining us on Anchored in Education again.
Thanks, Scott.
So I guess I have a bias, but I always enjoy hearing my sister talk passionately about art. And you can find her on Twitter, search at @JEnglandArt, or check out Instagram at JEnglandArt5. And I'll put a link to both of those on my website. And of course, I will also have resources and some of the other sites we mentioned, such as Our Voice Through Art and Jarrett's page on my website as well. Please go there and check it out. And don't forget to subscribe to Anchored in Education. You can find it in the iTunes or Google Play stores, as well as on Spotify. So one more time, I want to thank my sister and fantastic artist and teacher, Jodi England, for joining me for today's episode. Our Voice Through Art is truly an amazing organization offering opportunities for students with disabilities to express themselves in different ways. And you may be thinking, we don't have something like that in our area. That's okay. The strategies and suggestions given to us by Jodi shows us that we can modify our daily lessons to allow an artistic outlet to all students. Really, though, we should be doing this anyways, but I think we often struggle with figuring out how to accommodate. The end result then becomes either someone missing out due to high difficulty or changing an entire lesson to where the concept of our lesson is missed by all. So again, I'm going to include resources on my website, escottengland.com, so you can explore more on art therapy and art as therapy. One is not better than the other. It truly depends on the needs of that person. Let's just make sure that all students are given a fair opportunity to participate, because at the end of the day, we are all anchored in education.